Good morning to you. So excited to have you here with us. If you're new, you're hanging out for the first time, I want to say hello to you. I want to welcome you. My name is Jack, and I get to be one of the pastors here, and we're just thrilled that you chose to spend some time with us today. And I want you to relax and have a good time. If you don't know anything about our church, just know we're people like you. We're trying to learn what it means to discover and follow Jesus. That's what we're all about. And so we just want you to relax and have a good time. I know you probably have questions and thoughts, but you know what? We're going to do our best to try to help you with those. And so we're just glad that you're on this journey with us. I do want to also take a pause and just kind of address parents real quick, give you the heads up that next weekend, not only are we having like the pajama jammy jam, we're also opening up the brand new nursery, okay? And so that's a good thing, right? And so we've been working hard. Kenny and his team have been trying to put everything together and get all that ready. We're also opening the nursery. There's also going to be a parent lounge that's going to be available. That's kind of like a pride room option, so to speak, just to kind of give you an opportunity to still be a part of the service, but in a healthy way that removes boundaries for you, but also others around you, but also allows you the opportunity to entrust some of our volunteers with your kid for just a little over an hour. That's all. You know what? They give you some freedom. That's what I call that. You know what I'm saying? It's just some freedom where you can come in here and you can hang out and that you can be, connected with Jesus without, somebody tugging on you, right? Without having to pass the, Ritz crackers or something like that, right? And so we want you to please stop by, check that out, and make sure your kids are a part of that. Today, we're going to jump into part 3 of a series that we've been in over the last couple weeks that we just said is a really significant series for us. We said that as a church, our job or our mission, what we're trying to do is to help people discover and follow Jesus. And so we said that we wanted to take the next few weeks as we kind of head towards this celebration of Easter, kind of celebrating what Jesus has done for us, to actually learn more about Jesus and who he is. And the way that we're doing that is we're engaging the book of John. John, who wrote the book of John, actually understands where many of us are on our journey of faith, that some of us have questions, some of us don't quite understand some things, and we just got a lot of thoughts about Jesus, but we're not really sure that we know the whole of Jesus. And so John's the kind of guy that says, I get it, I understand that, I'm with you, and I want to help you understand. In fact, I was close to Jesus, and I spent a lot of time with Jesus, and so I heard of a lot of the things that Jesus taught. In fact, he says there's 7 statements that Jesus used that actually described who he was. I mean, how better to know Jesus than to actually get his very own words? It's as if Jesus said, you're asking questions, who am I? Let me tell you who I am. And so John begins to describe those things for us. And we think that's important for us to understand because we get it. There's lots of opinions about Jesus. There's lots of ideas of who Jesus is. There's lots of things that we've read or heard or been told since we were kids. But what if we could personally engage Jesus? That's really what John is after. John is not looking for us to just have ideas or information about Jesus. He wants us to have a personal connection with Jesus. He wants us to know more about Jesus and who Jesus is so that we can not only have just an informed decision of who Jesus is, but so that we can engage in a personal relationship with Jesus. If you're with us in week 1, we said that Jesus says that he is the bread of life, which means he not only wants to provide for us physically, but he wants to provide for us spiritually. He has everything that we need, that it's Jesus plus nothing equals, everything. That's all that we need. That's all that we have. That's all that we've got. That's okay because he is enough. Will we trust him to be enough? Last week, Pastor Troy said, hey, you know what? Jesus also says that I am the light of the world. He's not just this little dim light. He's not a tiny little flashlight. He's a God that illuminates, right? He's a God that shows up. He's a God that exposes darkness, not just around us, but even in our life. Not to make us feel bad or to make us like, oh, woe is me. No, so that he can deliver us out of that darkness and we can begin to walk in his light, right? We're going to have church today if you keep doing that. I'm telling you. We're going to have, I'm all right by it, but I'm ready to have some church. You know what I'm saying? Like, 8:30 and 10 o'clock, 11:30, we're ready to have some church. You know what I'm saying? I just might preach up in here today. But what we're going to pick up today, I was thinking about this when I was a kid. I don't know why, but I don't like this anymore. I'm not this way, but as a kid, I used to like to climb. Especially as it came in relation to like chain link fences. For some reason, they were easy to climb. The hole's already there for you. So like I would climb them all the time. Our backyard that we lived in, the house that we lived in, had this fence, this chain link fence that went around it, had a little gate where you can come in and out, and I would always climb over the fence. I just never would go through the gate. I'd climb over the fence. My mom, she saw that. She said, hey, you need to stop climbing over the fence or else you're going to hurt yourself. And I did what everybody else does. I said, your mom doesn't know anything. And so I'm going to keep climbing over the fence. So I did that, kept climbing over the fence. One day, I went to climb the fence, and I got too close to where the actual gate was. And as I was coming over, the gate shifted just a little bit, because it's not stationary like the rest of the fence, and I got my foot caught, and I fell over, and I came down. I crashed and hit the concrete back of my head, and I'll never forget it. My dad comes, he just immediately, we told you, and then he scoops me up, he takes me in the house, he's calling my mom, trying to figure out how to stop the bleeding. You know what I mean? It was like one of those crazy moments that you just don't forget. I had a thought after that day, and here's my thought. Why didn't I just go through the gate? Why was I content with climbing? I just don't understand. Why didn't I just go through the gate? But that also poses us a question as we kind of unpack what we want to talk about this morning, is simply this. Why do we do the things that we do when oftentimes we know better? Why do we do the things that we do when often we know better? But not only that, but often there is a voice of truth or a voice of reason that actually is calling us to a different way, calling us to something better, calling us to something more. Why do we continue to do the things that we actually do? Today, as we kind of dive into this and unpack this, we're going to be in John chapter 10. So if you brought your Bibles to church, or if you have your phones, or if you want to follow along on the screens, we're going to kind of talk about this interesting encounter that Jesus has with some of these religious leaders. But we can't talk about it until we give you some context to set it up, because it's really fascinating. John chapter 9, most scholars think that John chapter 9 and John chapter 10, they're just seamless. They just kind of go together. As John chapter 9 is ending in our Bible, really the way that John wrote it is it was just a continuation into 10. It wasn't like a separate day or a separate event. It was the same people. It was the same day. It was the same situation. So some of you might be familiar with this story. If you're new to church, it might be new to you. But in John chapter 9, something interesting happens. Jesus, he comes and he encounters a man who has been blind since he was born. Everybody that knew this guy knew him since he was born, and they all knew him to be blind, and he was a beggar because that was his only way of earning a living or doing anything with his life. Everybody thought he was no good, and so he was outside the temple begging, and Jesus comes by. His disciples see the man, and the disciples ask a question. He said, Jesus, who sinned and caused this man's blindness? And Jesus says, no, don't get it twisted. This is not about a sin thing. This is about somebody is in need of help, and here's what's going to happen. His life is going to glorify God. He is in this condition so that God might be glorified through his power at work in his life. Jesus goes over and he addresses the man, and the way he does it is fascinating. Jesus spits in the ground, makes little mud patties, puts them over the guy's eyes, and tells the guy to go wash them off. The guy does what Jesus says, because, what else are you supposed to do when you got spit mud cakes in your eyes other than wash them off? Like, you go and he washes them off, right? When he washes them off, suddenly he can see. His life has been changed, radically transformed. Not anything in and of himself, but because of Jesus Christ and his power. Now, the Pharisees that are looking on, they're looking and they're like, I don't understand, right? This is crazy. They get all in a fit over themselves. Why? Because they're the ones that are in control. They're the ones that have all the power. They're the ones that call all the religious shots. They're the ones that are the religious rule keepers. They're the ones that are able to tell people who's in and who's out. This Jesus comes along claiming to be from God, and they look at him and say, it's impossible that you're from God, because guess what? You don't follow all the God rules. You walk around healing people on the Sabbath. Everybody knows that if you follow God, you don't do any work on the Sabbath. Jesus says that's where you got it wrong. I am from God. God has sent me, his son, to be among you, with you, Emmanuel. God is doing something new right in front of you, and you're totally missing it because you're so caught up in your religious rules, in your religious rights, and all these things that have just been things that have identified who you are, but they're not things, get this, that bring you life. They're not things that are actually going to change you from the inside out. The Sabbath will give you rest, and rest is important, but the Sabbath will not save your life. The Sabbath can't do that. So Jesus, he begins talking more about this. And about that time when everybody gets in a fit, they start asking this guy, what happened to you? And he says, I don't know what happened to me, but this guy named Jesus, I don't know much about him, but guess what? He healed me. which leads me to believe that he is from God. In other words, he professes right in front of these religious leaders, I think Jesus is the Messiah. To which the religious leaders got all mad at this. Their Jewish brother, right? He's Jewish. They're Jewish. They get mad at him and they said, if you're going to follow this Jesus, guess what? We're unfriending you. Right? Like, we're kicking you off our social media. No more are we going to follow you on Instagram, right? In fact, they kicked them out of the temple. They also talked trash about Jesus and intended to kill him. Why? Because they didn't believe that Jesus was who he said he was. So in the mix of that, you read chapter 10. Chapter 10, starting in verse 1. It's fascinating what happens. It says this. I'm going to read it to you, and then we're going to spend some time breaking it down. I tell you the truth. Anyone who sneaks over the wall of a sheepfold rather than going through the gate must surely be a thief and a robber. But the one who enters through the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep recognize his voice, and they come to him. He calls his own sheep by name, and he leads them out. After he has gathered his own flock, he walks ahead of them, and they follow him because they know his voice. They won't follow a stranger. They will run from him because they don't know his voice. Those who heard Jesus use this illustration didn't understand what he meant. So he explained it to them. He says, I tell you the truth. I am the gate for the sheep. And all who came before me were thieves and robbers. But the true sheep did not listen to them. Yes, I am the gate, and those who come in through me will be saved. They will come and go freely, and they will find good pastures. The thief's purpose is to steal, kill, and destroy, but my purpose is to give them a rich and satisfying life. Now, this is a fascinating picture in this moment, because Jesus is using a word picture. He's using a metaphor. It's one of Jesus' ways that he loved to speak. He would paint a picture for people, hoping they would grasp who he was, right? He was trying to communicate to not just religious elite, but people who didn't understand anything about this Jesus at all. They had no religious upbringing. They were new to the whole Jesus thing. So he's trying to explain to them through this word picture. We hear this word picture, and it sounds strange to us because none of us know about sheep and shepherding. None of us grew up, probably, at least maybe you did, maybe I'll meet you today for the first time, that had like sheep, that owned sheep. Like none of you, like you have, your grandpa was a shepherd or anything like that. So it's really hard to make this connection. But yet we hear this idea of Jesus talking about a gate, and even for us, like gates, we don't know. Maybe some of us live in a gated community. Maybe some of us have a gate that goes to our backyard. But most of us, you got to understand this, that same word gate, it can also be translated to this thing right here. That's why I brought this guy. Door, okay? Like Jesus is the door, he says. Now it's fascinating. He's the door, he's the gate. I mean, whatever's going on. Okay, so Jesus, help us to understand what's going on, because this just seems weird. What's funny, though, is it sounds weird to us, but the people that he was talking to, they should have been the ones that would have known it if anybody was going to know it. They absolutely had an understanding of gates and sheep and shepherd and stuff like that. So I want us to sit in this today. I want us to break it down because I think there's something super important for us to take away from this today. So Jesus says, let me give you a clear picture of what I need you to know about who I am. He says, I tell you the truth, that anyone who sneaks over the wall of the sheepfold rather than going through the gate must surely be a thief and a robber. Now stop, okay? Like this should make sense to us, right? Think of your house. If somebody's coming to visit you, don't they go to the front door, they knock on the door, or they ring the doorbell, or whatever that is, and you come and you let them in, right? If there is anybody that shows up and they are trying to get into your house through the window, if there's anybody that shows up and is trying to get into your house, having jumped over the back gate, went around the side yard, and trying to come through the sliding glass door, guess what? You know that something is wrong. They just might be a what? A thief and a robber, right? Like that's not good. So we're following along. This is great, right? Like we're tracking with Jesus. Okay, so I understand Jesus. That kind of makes sense. So Jesus goes on. He says, but the one who enters through the gate, the one that's not going over the wall or trying to get in from a different way, the one who goes to the gate, guess what? That's the shepherd of the sheep. To which now it starts to get a little weird, and you're like, hey, I got to know something about shepherds and sheep to kind of really fully understand what this is. And so Jesus begins to paint this picture of what shepherding and sheep look like. This is what they would have seen. They would have known something similar to this. Probably something a lot more elaborate, depending on the city or the town that they were in at the time. This might have been a lot more rocks. The walls might have been higher. It might have been more of like a fortress, but it definitely had a clear gate, and it had a gatekeeper, which meant that this was a communal sheep pen. It was a communal sheepfold. In other words, all the shepherds that had been in that village for that night had their flocks of sheep. They wanted to get some rest. You can't just let sheep roam wherever they want to go because they will get lost. They will end up killed. They will be taken over by wild animals. So you have to protect the sheep. So every shepherd would bring their sheep into the sheepfold, all the shepherds together. I mean, imagine like the chaos, right? It's like, blah, 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 you know, like all stuff like that. It's like, it's crazy, right? There's all kinds of stuff like going on in this sheepfold. But what happens is those shepherds were able to go rest while the gatekeeper watched over the sheep to make sure that nobody would take anybody's sheep. In the morning when the shepherd got up, he would go over to the gatekeeper. This is what Jesus is saying. And the gatekeeper would recognize the shepherd that has put his sheep in there the night before. And he would allow that shepherd in to access his sheep. Jesus says it this way. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep, get this, they recognize his voice and they come to him. He calls his own sheep by name and he leads them out. Now, that makes sense, right? You got tons of sheep in here, right? Some of them, they're not yours. You're supposed to only take yours. So what do? You call your sheep by name, right? Like fuzzy, fluffy, woolly, cotton, let's roll. You know, like whatever it is. Like, I don't know. I don't know what you would call sheep. Like, I mean, it's just weird. I don't know if it's a special whistle or call, but I do know that the sheep recognize the shepherd and they know the tone of the voice. Right? This is actually backed up historically. If you look in the Middle East, you understand something about shepherding. You talk to Middle Eastern shepherds. This is what they do. They say sheep are not the smartest animals, but you can train them to be obedient to your voice. They will recognize the shepherd, to which Jesus, understanding that, goes on to say that after this shepherd has gathered his flock, he walks ahead of them, and they follow him because why? They know his voice. They can trust the shepherd. They recognize the shepherd. He's called them out by name. He's inviting them to something different, to something more, and they can trust him because they know his voice. Get this piece. He says they won't follow a stranger. They'll run from him because they don't know his voice. Fascinating thing about sheep. If Pastor Soy and I went to the sheepfold and I'm trying to access my sheep and I said, sheep, let's roll, right? They would know my voice. If Pastor Soy came in and said the same thing, the sheep would be like, right? Like, wrong. You know what I mean? Why? Because he and I's voice are different, right? The tone of our voice is different. The register of our voice is different. Right? The sheep understand that and they know that. And Jesus says that if a stranger comes in and tries to steal the sheep, guess what? The true sheep, the real sheep, the sheep that are focused on the shepherd, they'll recognize it right away. They'll be like, no, I can't go in that direction. That's not where I'm supposed to head. They won't go with the stranger. I was doing some reading about this, and I was trying to, hey, is this true? Like, this really happened? And yeah, like, this is true of shepherding. Sheep can know the shepherd's voice. I was reading one account where a guy from the Western culture went to Middle Eastern culture and was interviewing a sheep herder. And he said, hey, I understand this whole voice thing, right? Is that true? And he says, yes, it's absolutely true. You see it all the time. And he goes, okay, so here's my next question. Is there ever a time that the sheep will follow a stranger just like randomly? You know what the shepherd told him? He says, yes, there's one exception. He says that whenever a sheep gets sick, they'll follow anyone, anywhere. Jesus is breaking things down, and Jesus is saying, if you recognize the voice of the true shepherd, then you'll know exactly who to follow. But when you're spiritually sick, or you're spiritually disoriented, or you're spiritually blind, guess what happens? You're willing to follow anyone, anywhere. Jesus is addressing the Pharisees who had become some false teachers, who had kind of created limited access to God, who were trying to keep some people in and keep other people out. Jesus said, hey, you have to understand this about that kind of shepherding. That's just thieves and robbers. They're trying to take life from you. They're stopping your progress with God instead of offering you the life that God wants to offer you. They're putting walls and barriers in front of you. But if you are aware of the shepherd's voice, guess what? You won't follow a stranger. Now, here's what's interesting about that. Jesus explains this beautifully. All of us are tracking along with this today. We're like, okay, this is starting to make a lot of sense. I might have read this before, maybe didn't see it that way, but I get it now. And this is what happens. Those that heard Jesus use the illustration, they were like, so what are you trying to say? What exactly does that mean? What am I supposed to do with that? Yeah, I know a little bit something about sheep and shepherd, but like what, Jesus, okay, like can you get to the point? Is there a point? Like I'm not sure I understand. You know why that strikes me as odd? Because Jesus wasn't talking to people that weren't smart. Jesus was talking to intelligent people. Jesus was talking to the religious elite. Jesus was talking to the religious rule keepers. Jesus was talking to people who knew God from an early age, who grew up in these Jewish households that would have a clear understanding of God, but yet they were missing what God was doing in front of them through Jesus. Which leads me to believe, and it's my suggestion to you, that their problem was not an intellectual problem. Their problem was a spiritual problem, just like you and I. Our problem is not an intellectual problem. We know things about God. We know of Jesus, but our problem is much deeper than that. It's a spiritual problem. That we're not sure that we can trust this Jesus, that we get confused on the voice of the shepherd, and so we get stuck not knowing where to go and what to do. But it leaves us sick and disoriented, and if we're not careful, we'll end up following anybody, anywhere that would be willing to promise anything that we think that we need. They were unable to understand what Jesus was communicating. So Jesus, he chooses to drill down deeper. He wants them to know. Jesus is like, all right, so let me explain in more detail. Let me kind of expand your thinking a little bit on what I'm talking about. Let me kind of help you clarify exactly what I mean by this. And Jesus does it in an interesting way. Believe it or not, he switches the scenery a little bit to something more like this. You're like, okay, all right, tell us about that. Okay, I'm glad you asked. Okay, this too is a sheepfold. The shepherd goes to the gatekeeper. The gatekeeper lets him in. He calls his sheep by name. He calls them out of something. Understand this. Invites them into something else. Jesus comes, he calls what he was doing is he was calling these religious leaders out of their blind vision to see who he was, inviting them to something greater that God was doing right in front of them. He goes to the gatekeeper. He chooses to call them out, call them by name, to come and to follow. Now, shepherds, when they would do that, they would leave the city and they would be gone for long periods of time. When you're gone for long periods of time, you still have to feed the sheep. You still have to look after the sheep. The sheep still need some kind of protection. So what would happen is these shepherds would create these kind of barriers. They would put rocks together. They'd put thistles together. They'd put anything they could together to corral the sheep in at night, to create a safe environment for the sheep, to actually kind of make sure that everybody stayed in here so that no predators, no wild animals could come and steal the sheep. They made an entranceway for the sheep to be able to come in and come out whenever necessary. So Jesus begins to kind of change the picture, and he does so to set them up, to give them this big, giant statement. I mean, this big, bold claim. I mean, Jesus kind of like, this is just kind of just being boom, right in your face, right? Like, I'm gonna make this clear to you so that you don't have any more confusion, right? Because confused is obviously what they were. And so Jesus gives them that picture of this sheep pen, and guess how he follows it up? He begins to explain to them, I tell you the truth. Remember we said that anytime Jesus says that, truly, truly, verily, verily, like whatever it is, right? Jesus is saying like, yeah, this is the real deal. Like, listen up, right? He says, he explained to them, I tell you the truth. This is one of those moments. You want to know something about me? I am the gate. Translation, I am the door. I am the door for the sheep. I am the gate for the sheep, to which they're looking at him and they're thinking, that's a big statement, Jesus. That rubs us the wrong way, Jesus. Why? Because this is what Jesus is trying to tell them. Jesus makes it absolutely clear that he's not just a gate, but he is the gate. He's not just a door, he is the door. In other words, you can say it like this: the only access to God and a relationship with him is through Jesus. In other words, we live our life like this. I'm just going to go through the door that opens up to me, right? I'm just going to kind of be a part of this, whatever. I'm going to pursue my own dreams, right? So I'm going to walk through the door of my dreams. You know what I mean? I'm going to make it happen, right? I'm going to walk through the door of success, only to get here and be like, okay, but success only took me so far. And then it's like, okay, well, I'm going to walk through the door of like job promotion. And we get job promotion only to realize job promotion only brought me so far. And then it's like, okay, well, I'm going to walk through the door of like, all the things that I ever wanted I accomplished. Only that takes us so far. Why? Because our life is spent going through door after door after door after door after door, all the while missing the door because we want our lives to be consumed with lots of doors. We like options. We like all kinds of choices. We want everything to be kind of our way because it's all about our comfort and happiness. But Jesus says, I'm not so much concerned about your comfort and happiness as I am about your soul, about your eternity, about the direction of your life. So what I'm doing is I'm getting rid of these doors and I'm saying, hey guys, guess what? I am the door. You don't have to keep looking anymore. You don't have to keep searching anymore. You don't have to keep going through things that'll make false promises that they're not able to keep. Things that give you hope, things that say they're going to provide this and that, but yet at the end of the day, leave you drained and empty. Jesus makes this big, bold claim in this statement right in front of them, and he separates himself from anything else, which I get it. It makes us uncomfortable. There's some of you that might be in this room and you're kind of skeptical about this whole church thing and religion thing and Jesus thing, and you're new to faith and you're trying to figure all that out, and you're saying like, no, that's too bold of a statement. I mean, it's kind of audacious. I mean, that's like inclusive. That's like saying Jesus, like, he's the only way. Yep. That's what Jesus is saying. Like, that's what he's saying, that he is the only way. In other words, like, it's not, hey, well, but wait, time out. Like, I'm a good person. I'm a good person. I do good things. I think Jesus is trying to call our attention to, like, hey, that's good, but guess what? You're not that good. And if we're honest with ourselves, there's none of us that are good enough. But isn't this true of what other pursuits, other doors, even other thoughts of theology or even like spirituality will lead us to? That you just do good things for yourself, you do good things for other people, and then suddenly, hopefully you're good enough, and then maybe you'll make it to this like eternity, somehow, some way. Jesus says, how about I just take the guesswork out of you? Like, why sit around like trying to figure out how good enough is good enough? How about Jesus says that even in your brokenness and even in your mess and even in all the junk that you have in your life, I'm still going to be the gate and the door that is wide open for you. That if you come through me, guess what? Life changes. Things happen. You can be eternally secure in your relationship through Jesus Christ. Jesus makes it absolutely clear who he was. Why? Because he wanted us to understand something from this. So why would Jesus say this? Because he was clear that all who came before him were thieves and robbers. In other words, all these other things that you're pursuing in your life, all these other doors that you're going down, how long did it take you to realize that it only led you to a dead end? How long did it take you till you realize that it just left you feeling empty? Jesus is making it clear. All who came before me, they're just thieves and robbers. But guess what? The sheep that know the shepherd's voice, the sheep that recognize the shepherd, guess what? They'll stop going down those paths. They'll stop heading in those same directions. Why? Because they know that the shepherd is calling them to something greater. He's calling them to something more. So why would Jesus say something like that to these people? You have to remember, right? They're the religious law keepers. They're the ones that are responsible. They think they're in control of who has access to God and who doesn't. They think they're the ones that, can create like this element of control that says like, we get to decide who gets to be a part of the club and who doesn't. Right? You have to be good enough to actually fit into our rules and regulations, to which Jesus comes by and says, no, guess what? My door, it stays open. My door is wide open for anyone and everyone who is willing to come to me. Why? Jesus says, yes, I am the gate. Those who come in through me, guess what happens to them? They will be saved. Saved. And you're thinking about it, you're like, well, saved. Like, saved from what? Like, what is he going to save me from? How about from you? How about from your mistakes? How about from your mess? How about from your sin? How about from those destructive behaviors? How about those bad habits? How about all those things that you've tried really hard in and of yourself to kick those habits, but only to realize that you cannot do it by yourself? That you cannot do it on your own. Jesus says, I am the gate, I am the door. Anyone who comes through me, guess what? They will be saved, which lets us know, if you're following along your notes, that through Jesus, we find rescue from wandering in the wrong direction. We find rescue from wandering in the wrong direction. And some of you might say, well, I don't know that I wander a whole lot. You and I both know that there's so many distractions. There's so many shiny things in front of us. There's no shortage of things that are promising us any number of things that we think we need in our life. Oh, get this because you need this. Get this because you need this. And if you don't have enough of that, then get this because you're definitely going to need this. You're like, well, that's really vague. Well, how about let's get more money because you're going to need some security. How about you set yourself up for the future because you know what? One day you're going to retire. You got to set that up. How about you pursue all your wildest dreams, because you only live once, and so you just might as well make the most of it, and everything. Okay? There's nothing wrong in and of those things. Don't get me wrong. Don't twist my words. Understand this. None of those things, though, will give you sustaining life. They might be great things in your life, but they aren't your life. They're not going to sustain your life. They're not going to be giving you an abundant life. Jesus says, I'm the gate. I will rescue you from wandering the wrong way because we, like sheep, are prone to wander. Every single day, temptation comes. It's enticing. I mean, tell me temptation don't look good. I dare you, right? I mean, think about it. Like sin, right? Sin comes all fancy and dressed up with a tie, everything like that. Why? Because sin looks fun for a while. And if it doesn't, you're probably doing something wrong, right? Let's just be real. That's why we pursue it, because it looks shiny, it looks promising. But guess what? The wages of sin is what? Yeah. The way to sin. So Jesus is calling us out. He's saying, look, there's two paths. There's two doors. There's a door that you can take that leads to life, which is him. And there's a door that you can continue to pursue that ultimately is going to lead to your destruction. But we find rescue from our wandering in the wrong direction through Jesus Christ. He is willing to do that for us in our life. And this is Proverbs 14:12 makes it very clear to us. There is a way that appears to be right to a lot of us. We think we're heading in the right direction. We think we need this and that, but at the end, it leads to death, just like we've been talking about. So Jesus says, I'm going to come and I'm going to give you rescue, and here's what I'm going to rescue you from. I'm going to rescue you from all those things, all those bad habits, all those hang-ups, all that stuff. I'm going to rescue you from yourself, but guess what? You don't have to do anything to earn it. You don't have to do anything for yourself to get it. Which is another thing that these false doors will lead us to believe that, okay, well, I got to get my act together and I've got to get everything right for me to come before God. And once I am right, then I'll go before God and God will accept me. No, that's not what Paul tells us. Paul says in Ephesians 2:8-9, it is by grace. Definition, God's unmerited favor. God's love for you. It is by grace that you have been what? Saved. Through what? Faith. Not through doing stuff. Not through working hard, not through trying to show Jesus that you're better now, not trying to show Jesus that you've got your act together now, not just trying really hard to do really right things and not say the wrong things because it's so hard and I know my mouth. No, he says that by faith in him, and this is not from yourselves. In fact, it's a gift from God that he extends freely to you, not by works so that no man can boast. What I love about that is Jesus says he takes you just as you are. He loves you just as you are, but he doesn't want you to stay that way. He's willing to work in you and to change you. And it's not by anything that you do. It's by his power at work in you. So that when you walk in your life, even though you don't have it all together, you don't have everything figured out, and you are at the perfect place to be imperfect, and people can see that. Here's the reality of your life, though. It continues to point others to Jesus. Why? It points them to grace. That points them to this idea that you have been rescued through your faith in him. And you didn't do that yourself. God gave you that incredible gift. This is who Jesus is. This is who he says that he is. And the question I'm asking everybody today is, what have you been looking to save you? The churchy theological definition is salvation. What have you been looking to for salvation? What are those things in your life that you keep pursuing that you think are going to provide you some kind of rescue? What habits and behaviors and addictions do you keep going back to because you think they're going to provide you some kind of rescue? What decisions and choices do you keep making because you think that they're going to provide you some kind of rescue? When in reality, they've only left you empty time and time and time again. Jesus says, I am the door. I want to bring you out. I'm inviting you to something different. All the things that are stealing from your life, that are taking from your progress, I want to bring you out of those things. If you're willing to know my voice, if you're willing to follow me, because what's important to Jesus is the relationship between the sheep and the shepherd. The relationship between the sheep and the shepherd. The second thing is this, that through Jesus we find security and protection. Through Jesus, we find security and protection. Can we be honest with each other for a moment? Isn't this what we all long for? We want job security. We want financial security. We want security for our kids. We want security for our future. We want protection from bad things. We want protection from bad people. We want security. That's our deep-seated longing. And you know what's so great about Jesus? Jesus says, I know. I know that you want security. I know that you desire protection. I know that you need these things. But the problem with most of us is we spent all of our lives ourselves trying to fight for those things, trying to provide our own protection, trying to provide our own security. We've had people walk out on us, people give up on us. We've had the mind frame that nobody's ever tried to protect or get me secure, so I've just had to do all this by myself. I've been alone in this whole thing, and all it's done is made us incredibly self-sufficient. But even being so self-sufficient, you and I go home at the end of the day, we sit on the foot of our bed only to realize, you know what? That we're still not strong enough. We're still not capable enough. We're still not big enough in and of ourselves to actually provide the security and the protection that we need. And even more so spiritually, we are absolutely defenseless on our own to battle the enemy. Defenseless on our own to battle the enemy. So Jesus comes along and says, hey, let me remind you, remember, all those who came before me are thieves and robbers, but he is the gate. He is literally the door. In other words, when we say that Jesus is the door, what you have to understand is something important. That picture that I showed you about that sheep pen, you know, the one that they're traveling in, the one that had the opening for the sheep to come in and out. You know why Jesus says, I am the gate? Because a good shepherd, you know what he does? He actually lays down in the opening. He hangs out right there. As soon as the sheep are all in the pen, as soon as he calls them and invites them into something greater, into safety and security, right, into protection, right? You know what the shepherd does? He posts up right there in the doorway. He gets some sleep right there in the doorway. And if anything tries to come and steal from the sheep, anything tries to come and hinder the sheep, anything tries to come and create damage to the sheep, guess what the shepherd does? The shepherd says, first, you're going to have to go through me. You've got to go through me first. Jesus says that when we live our life this way, that thieves and robbers, they might come, but guess what? I am the shepherd. I am the door. I'm the door. I stand right there. They have to go, whatever it is, has to go through me first. Because I am the God, Jesus says, that protects. Psalms 121, 7 and 8 says, God guards you from every evil. He guards your very life. He guards you when you leave and when you return. He guards you now, and guess what? He guards you always. Sounds like to me the psalmist is saying he just guards you. He just keeps on guarding you. He just is not going to stop guarding you. Jesus is your guardian. Jesus is your protector. Jesus is your security. All the security and protection that you're looking for anywhere else, guess what? Jesus says you won't find it there. Where will you find it? In the gate, in the door, in who he is. Our protector, our guidance, our director. Jesus is adamant about who he is because he wants us so bad to know that he is the door. He's not a trap door, but he's rather an entrance into the security and the care of an incredibly good God. And the third thing is this, if you're following along in your notes, through Jesus we find freedom and provision. Through Jesus we find freedom and provision. John 10, verse 9, the second part of verse 9, Jesus explains these sheep, when they come in through the gate, guess what? They'll come and go freely and will find good pastures. They'll come and go freely and they'll find good pastures. This would have been something entirely shocking to Jesus' audience. because they did know something about sheep. When Jesus said that he was the gate for the sheep, you know what my guess is that they would have thought of, especially around the temple, right there in this setting that everything was going on? They would have thought of this entrance to the city that was known as the sheep gate, where the sheep would come in, have access to the city, only to be marched straight to the temple. And these sheep were going to the temple for one specific purpose, to be the sacrifice for the sins of men and women. That these sheep, they would go in through this door of the temple to never return again. Once you're going through that door, you're not coming back out, right? Jesus said, hey, guess what? I am the door. I am the door for the sheep. And when the sheep come through this door, guess what you could believe? That these sheep, they have freedom. They have freedom to come and go as they please. Why? Because I'm the shepherd that will lay down its life for the sheep. I am willing to protect the sheep, secure the sheep, but I'm going to lay down my life for the sheep so that these sheep can experience freedom. In other words, this relationship that I'm inviting you to, it's not something that's kind of like I'm forcing you into it, I'm manipulating you into it, you have to do it, and there is no other choice just because I said I'm the only way. No, he says you still have a choice, and when you choose, guess what? Here's what you got to know about me being the door. I don't want to just be a part of Sundays. I don't want to just be a part of your prayer life. I don't want to just be a part of your prayer requests. Guess what? I want to be a part of your everyday and everything. In your coming and your going, I want to walk with you. This idea of this coming and going and finding good pastures is Jesus being part of every area of our life, providing freedom for us. Providing access to everything that we need, because Jesus says that a good shepherd, he's a provider. He leads you to good pastures. I love this passage of scripture that Paul talks about to the church of Philippi in chapter 4, verse 19. He says, my God will supply every need of yours according to his riches and glory in who? Christ Jesus. That it's through Jesus. God is issuing us this provision. In other words, he doesn't say that he gives you everything you want. He's not going to come through on every single one of your desires. But he does say that he recognizes your wants. He recognizes your desires. But Jesus is so good that he knows exactly what you need. And sometimes our desires and our wants are not what we need. In his love for us, he sees that, and he doesn't give us those things that we want and that we desire. Instead, he gives us exactly what we need according to his riches in glory through Christ Jesus. This is a powerful statement that Jesus gives to his people. But at the same time, the Pharisees are still sitting there questioning this Jesus, scratching their head like, we don't believe you. So after all the imagery, after everything he says, Jesus kind of brings it home to one last point. Jesus says, listen, all who came before me are thieves and robbers, but you need to know there's something different about me. You need to know there's something different about me. He says, thieves, their purpose, let's just be honest, steal, kill, and destroy. That's what they do. You can't be mad at that. You know that in advance. That's what they do. But Jesus says, listen, my purpose, the reason why I've come, the reason why I'm sharing this with you, the reason why I healed this guy born blind, the reason why I'm walking out trying to teach something new to you so that you can get a hold of this is because my purpose is to come and give you rich and satisfying life. In other words, Jesus is going to the gates where the gatekeeper is. The gatekeeper is opening the gate. He's calling us by name. He's leading us out of there, calling us into something new, something fresh, something more, in which he'll rescue us from wandering, in which he'll provide safety and security, in which he will provide freedom and provision as we continue to listen to the shepherd's voice and choose to follow. My question for you is, would you follow? The reason why I'm asking you that is because I want you to wrestle with a couple questions today as we prepare to share in communion together. And the two questions that I think we should wrestle through, not just today, but this week as you think about Jesus the door. Look, it's my prayer that every single door that you go through, you're going to remember this message. So much so it's going to bother you. Because there's doors everywhere. You got up this morning and went through the bathroom door, right? Came out of the bathroom door, went right out the bedroom door, right? Went out your front door, got in your car door, right? Got out of your car door, came in through the church doors, right in through those double doors, and sat right here. You're going to leave today, you're going to go right back out, and you're going to repeat the same thing probably, right? As you go through the door of the restaurant to eat some lunch. There's doors everywhere, but sometimes we just miss the door that's right in front of us. So the only way to help us understand that is, what is Jesus inviting you out of? Can you think through that? What is Jesus inviting you out of today? What are the things that you've been looking to provide you that salvation, provide you that rescue, provide you that safety and security that you know have left you empty? They just can't cut it. What is Jesus inviting you out of? But here's something awesome to think about too. What is Jesus inviting you into? Based on what's been said today, based on John 10, based on what we learned, what is he inviting you out of today? How do you make this personal? What is he inviting you out of? What is Jesus inviting you into? Right? It's that Jesus thing again. God, for most people, intelligently, we know a little bit about God. God's kind of off in a distance. You know, God kind of does his thing. I do my thing. And then when I need help, I ask God. He usually does things. You know, we just kind of, we're cool like that. Right? But Jesus, guess what? God sends Jesus, and it gets incredibly personal. He's all up in your face. He wants to be a part of everything in your life. And he's inviting you out of something today, to invite you into something today. Will you follow? Jesus, I thank you for your love for us. I thank you for the people in this room. I thank you, Jesus, Lord, that we're here today because we want to know you more. And Jesus, your desire is that we indeed would know you, that we would know who you are, so much so that you specifically told us, if you want to know about me, guess what? I am the door. I'm the door to your peace, to your happiness. I'm the door to your salvation. I'm the door to your protection, to your security. I'm the door to your freedom, to your provision. I am the door. Jesus, I pray that as we consider this message today, we consider what your word says in John chapter 10. God, I pray that we would ask ourselves the question, that we would allow this to sink and permeate into our hearts. Oh God, what are you calling us out of for what you want to call us into? And Lord, I pray that we'd have the boldness to take that next step. I pray that we'd have that boldness to follow. Lord, I pray, God, that you would remove every obstacle. Lord God, help us to recognize the thief and the robber, Lord, so that we can clearly hear the voice of the shepherd. And Jesus, we thank you for it. We love you and we worship you today. In Jesus' name, amen and amen. This morning, our ushers are going to come down front with the communion elements, and as they do, I want to invite you to participate in communion with us. If you're here today and you wouldn't consider yourself a member of Cityline Church, that's okay. You can still participate in communion, but we just do ask that you've chosen to make Jesus Christ the Lord of your life, that you have a relationship with Jesus. And if you're here today and you're not sure about that relationship, we want to offer you that opportunity as well. That is just simply you just saying, Jesus, I give you my life. I want to follow you. I ask for your forgiveness. So Jesus, here I am. I'm going to walk through that door that you've offered me. I'm going to give my life to you because I understand that you gave your life for me. We believe that as you take those next steps in following Jesus, that's just the beginning. That's this great starting point to all that he has in store for you. So I encourage you to take that next step today. Let's worship together.